Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I am Dr. Andrew Stan. He is Dr. Michael Werman, Esquire. On today's show, we'll get to the part three of our NFL quarterback preview for the 2024 NFL season. We'll be talking about the quarterbacks of the AFC West and AFC South divisions, which will include our Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk a little bit about training camp and the first preseason game for the 2024 season. And we'll also talk about the Kansas City Royals somewhat in the show also. Still in the lead for the wild card spot, which is pretty shocking now that we're in August. So a happy surprise, I guess, for us. But we'll start today's show for the fourth and now final time, I believe, on the Olympics for this season. Mike, we had the finale for the Olympics. The closing ceremonies are now completed. The U.S. still did quite well overall, had most medals. Ended up winning both of the basketball sides, the men's and women's, and did pretty well in the final counts and everything. What from the last week were you watching the most of, and what did you find most entertaining from the last week?
I was watching a lot of sort of random things. I was watching a lot of the track and field events. The last couple of days turned out to be kind of interesting and maybe a little bit of a disappointment for some of the Americans with the 4x100 relay kind of dropping the baton, and we're not dropping the baton, being disqualified again because they couldn't pass the baton correctly.
Figuratively drop the baton by getting disqualified.
Drop the ball, I guess we could say. Um,
Yes.
and with Jordan Lyles turning up having COVID, so the Americans did not win the 200, which was his favorite, which was probably his best race, but he still ran a very good time. So he was still well under 20 seconds. He got the bronze medal
Yeah.
with COVID. So
So
that was,
an ailing Lyles is still like the third fastest runner in the world.
yeah. So that was, yeah. It seemed like he would have probably won had he not. I guess although the first place guy was the guy from Botswana. Um, was very good though too. But I think I was actually most interested though, surprisingly, was in Olympic basketball when the game against Serbia was very close. That was a kind of big come from behind victory for the United States, and the game against France was also pretty close, and that was a kind of a game that was very exciting at the end when Steph Curry made those 4 3-pointers in the last minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that, and put the French away. And Curry had finally, it took him a while to get warmed up, but he had his two best games were the last two games of the basketball tournament, and it kind of shows how much the world has caught up to the United States, and the U.S. really had to work pretty hard to pull out those victories. So those were fun to watch. I watched
They were great games though. I mean, they were entertaining to watch too.
yeah.
Did you like the pace of play in these Olympic games and the very few commercial breaks?
Yeah, they
Once the
went
halftime was over.
fast. They were short
Yeah.
games. I guess they're only 40 minutes long compared to the 48 of an NBA game,
Yeah.
but it seems like they're also um, more up and down. Maybe it's a little bit because it's a little like more like an all-star game when those are a little more up and down than the average NBA game, which is a lot of like ISOs and let's slow everything down and kind of run it through one player and not this was a lot more because there's so much talent on every part of the floor. It was a lot more entertaining, I think, to
Yeah.
watch everything kind of go. Uh,
Well, from game to game, there were like different players that led the team too. It wasn't just like LeBron James dominating every game. He seemed like be like consistent performer in all the games. But was it Edwards had a good game like in the quarterfinals, and
yeah,
like Durant had that one huge game early, and then was basically like non-existent in another game, and so it was
yeah. I think Durant turned out to be he's the highest scoring Olympian now. I think he passed
was it right?
Lisa Leslie or one of the women's players who was
Yeah.
in some. And he's also the first American man to win 4 gold medals. So I guess LeBron was not on one of the teams that Durant was on.
Oh,
Because I think LeBron has 3 golds and a bronze. He was on that bronze winning team in Athens that kind of shook everything up for men's basketball. But it was, yeah, I thought it was really exciting. I watched some of the women as well. The women, it seemed like were dominant most of the time, and then for some reason they couldn't do the same thing to France. France, or like, because it was a low scoring game too, so the United States wasn't scoring very many points. It just didn't have, I think it's maybe one of those games where they needed more 3-point shooting, and maybe somebody like Caitlin Clark could have provided that, but they still won, so it didn't really matter.
yeah.
But it was one of those things where it seemed like the men had more shooters on their team, and the women had more like inside presence on their team. And it turns out that, well, 3 points are more than 2 points, so you probably need shooters. You need big guys too. Like France had some really good big man play, but the France big guys, they could shoot threes, like Wembyana, and who's that? I can't remember that one guy's name who he doesn't play in the NBA anymore. He played briefly.
Mm,
Plays like Real Madrid now.
mm,
So for the G, he was really good, but he might get an NBA shot. But
mm.
the dancing bear, they called him. Um,
The dancing bear.
it is Yabusele,
Mm.
Gershon Yabusele. Yeah, he
Oh,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he was really good in the finals, um, and he played for the Celtics briefly.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, he probably will make, probably the Olympics will give him another shot at the NBA. Um, but a lot of the really good players. So it seems, maybe I guess it also seems like, well, maybe some of those EuroLeague players are really good. Um, most of the Serbian team, a lot of them were EuroLeague, and French team, some of them were too. As so,
They
but
both had at least some NBA players, but they weren't like entirely NBA players like the US team is made up of
yeah,
entirely NBA
it's one
players.
of those things where you wonder what in 4 years is going to happen, because the best players on the USA team were all late 30s or 40. I think maybe LeBron is 40, or maybe he's not 40, he's 39.
Yeah.
Um, but Durant and Curry are both like 36, 37, something like that. So it's hard to say whether they'll be maybe 35, 36 instead of 36, but they'll both be pushing 40 in Los Angeles. So you wonder who of those guys are going to be around, and so like, it seems the French team was much younger. Some of the other
Yeah.
teams, like the Canadian team, was younger. They were maybe surprised to be knocked off by France, but um, they also have that guy, was it Olivier something or other, who's like 7'8", right now, who's going to play for Florida. He's going to be probably 23, 24, maybe 23 by the time the Olympics roll around. So he's like bigger than Wemby. So they'll have a lot of competition 4 years from now, and you wonder whether the United States is going to win or not. I guess Embiid is still young, but it seems like he might play for some other country next time too. There are rumors that maybe he would play for Cameroon, or for he got booed because he was maybe eligible for the French team, but he didn't play for
Yeah.
France.
That's fine. He's one of the most overrated NBA players anyway, so it's totally fine if he doesn't play for the US.
Yeah, I don't know who the 2028, uh,
But
but like
they did,
Halliburton and Tatum probably will play more. Um,
yeah. Yeah, because they didn't play much at all in the Olympics at all. So
well,
they yeah, they didn't seem like they really had like a contingent of those transition type guys to like, the young guys to help,
Anthony
foster the team
Edwards.
along as
Anthony
the
Edwards is
next
probably going
guys.
to be the big star. He's pretty young, isn't he? He's maybe
Yeah,
22.
yeah, he's pretty young. 25, 24, 25, probably something like that. Halliburton's only like 22, I think, isn't he? 23.
Yeah,
That was like his first year in the NBA. So
yeah. So they have some young guys, but it's gonna be. But it was Durant and Curry or LeBron, one of those three. It seems like at any one time was carrying the team. Um,
yeah,
Embiid had a good game against Serbia to come back. That was his. He didn't play that great in the rest of the. You find him overrated, but he's still a big guy who can shoot a three, which
yeah.
is needed in the international game.
He's capable of being a very good player, but then he makes like boneheaded moves that sometimes too, and just throws balls away or does something dumb. I don't know. He's one of the most maddening players. I thought even when he was in college to watch.
Well, he
So
went to KU, so he's not one of your favorites for sure.
starting way back there, just because he was a KU guy. So,
Yeah.
but he was injured most of his KU career anyway. I don't think he even played
No, he didn't
in the
play in the
NCAA
NCAA
tournament.
tournament. I don't think. Well, the one year where KU was they were favored, I think, going to win. I think they were favored to win if Embiid had played. They probably would have won
But yeah,
that year, but they didn't.
it was
Embiid.
it was frustrating to watch those games because like he would foul basically everybody on every play, and they don't call. I mean, conference play, they don't call things against KU that would get called in other games though too. So
I like your
it's
KU.
huh?
Uh, I like your KU dislike. It's always enjoyable to.
They're the most ridiculous team in all of sports.
Yeah. Anyway,
The thumb has been on the scale for them for so long. They finally did not win the Big 12 conference last year, which I think is like the first time they didn't win the conference, which shows how much
I think there
absurdity was
was. I
going
think
on
there's
behind the
been a couple of
scenes.
years they haven't won, but they had like 12 or 13 years in a row where they did win the Big 12. Um,
They like tied one year that they still get credit for, stuff like that, you know. But last year they weren't close, which was nice.
mhm.
Which I'm hoping is the beginning of an era where they now become the doormats for the rest of the conference for a decade or 12. It's the only way it's fair, Mike.
Well, maybe it's Iowa State's league of the future.
Probably not, but it's fine.
Well, the Big 12 is going to be a lot different starting this year without Texas and Oklahoma, and with the addition of Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and um, Colorado again. I guess the
Yeah.
rebranding of
And I
Colorado.
mean, it was already changing with, especially with Houston there too, which is another like powerhouse. So, I mean, there are a lot of basketball schools in that conference now. So
Yeah,
it's
so was Arizona,
gonna be
and
tough competition. Yeah.
Arizona is one of the top 5 or 6 probably programs
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
country. And now with Baylor and KU and Houston and Cincinnati's historically a very good basketball school as
Yeah.
well. It's yeah.
No slouches.
Well, we'll talk more about Big 12 football and basketball probably as the fall and winter approach. But any other Olympic things that jumped out at you? The U.S. they won exactly 40 gold medals, which was the same number of gold medals that China won, but the United States won way more way more silvers and bronzes than China did. So it seems like and they also won way more fourth places than China. I saw a table where the U.S. was at 22 fourth place finishes. I think Italy actually won the fourth place finishes. They had 26, so they were the
Oh,
hardest luck
oh,
country. But China wasn't even on like the top 10. So like they were like one of those countries that either won or did terribly or weren't even in it, I think, in the Olympics. That's
yeah.
interesting. They swept like in some ways like they sweep all of the events that are like what I think many countries don't see as marquee events. Like they
Yeah.
they sweep like table tennis, and then they swept the
Some
diving. They got
like
8 gold
diving
medals
stuff. Yeah.
in diving. Diving I
I
think is
don't
a
care
little
about
bit
that.
more marquee than table tennis, but like they
Yeah.
look at these little they do well in these little things that they really rack up medals that the United States they aren't going to win much on the track. They aren't you know they did win a little bit in swimming, but not as much as maybe people thought because maybe they were allowed to dope a little bit less than normal. Um, they did win the 4x100. They won the 4x100 medley relay, which was a surprise. But the Chinese swimmers all were caught for doping about 4 years ago. They said it was some tainted food that they ate or something like that. So they didn't it
Yeah.
didn't end up coming back to bite them. But yeah, so it's interesting the kind of different strengths that the two countries have. Um, but yeah, there's China had a very good 110-meter high hurdler at one point. That's the
Hmm.
last like Chinese track star I remember. I think in Beijing they had a Li Jiang, that's what it was. He won the gold medal in hurdling in Athens.
Hmm.
So I remember him. Okay. He is one of China's most successful athletes, has emerged as a cultural icon in China for his gold medal in Athens. Because I think he was supposed to be big in the I don't think he won the Beijing one, but yeah, the USA won they won both hurdles. And most of the hurdles races, it seemed like they won. Uh, so they did really, really well in. So that was something that was kind of fun to watch. Especially after doing so poorly in the pool in the first week of
Yeah.
the Olympics. So we'll see how they do in Los Angeles. Yeah, you didn't see the closing ceremonies though. I don't believe you didn't see Phoenix perform or Tom Cruise jump off the roof of the stadium and then drive off like Maverick on a motorcycle to carry the Olympic torch all the way to Los Angeles. Um, and then hear the Red Hot Chili Peppers play. And they had Snoop and I think Snoop and Dre also were there, and some other fairly well-known Hollywood kind of icons. I think they're really going to play up the Hollywood part of the 2028 Olympics. It will be
Yeah, seems like.
so. This was Paris's third Olympics hosting. This was also going to be Los Angeles's third Olympics. They have been hosted 1932. We were too young to remember that one. 1984, which I vaguely remember parts of, and then the 2028 games.
Were you impressed with how close the odds makers had the gold medal totals pegged for the US? The odds makers had it 40 and a half, and
Yeah,
I
it ended
ran
up being
right
40.
up to it, right
So
up
I
to the
won
line.
slightly on that one. I ended up winning a few of my bets. I think lost money on the whole. I think you end up winning a little bit of money on your bets. So, well, we don't have the
Yeah,
numbers right now, but when we show this on YouTube, you'll put up the betting numbers and show how well you did. But
yeah,
yeah, I won a few here and there, but I didn't. My big bets, like I think your golf bet, is really what put you over the top when
yeah,
Scheffler beat Schaufler, who kind of was ahead and then faded. That's what I think separated the two of us.
yeah.
Um, but
Well, I think I played it pretty safe on the bets, or like I had a set of bets that were pretty safe. I was like hoping that would, pay off
mhm.
more likely than not, and like USA men's basketball team winning and stuff like that that were like relatively low odds.
I bet
But
against the USA in most cases, and that did not turn out terribly well, except in the overall
overall,
number of gold medals. But I think that was somewhat it was fairly close to what last year was. I think that we'd be remiss if we did not mention breaking as maybe the first and only time that it will be in the Olympics, and perhaps the only time because of the terrible, hilarious performance of Australian breakdancer Rachel Gunn, aka B Girl Ray Gunn. Did you watch any of her performance?
I didn't see any of it as it happened, but I have seen clips on TikTok in like random things that were all hilarious. So
She is a college professor of cultural studies, and do you know what she studies as her cultural study? It is
is it
breakdancing. She is a
is it
scholar
breakdancing?
of breakdancing. And that is what she studies, Australian breakdancing culture. And somehow she weaseled her way into the Olympics. And from what it seems like, all of like you see better breakdancing clips like on like America's Got Talent or like 12-year-old kids doing these things than you actually saw from the Olympics. So it seems like there was some sort of odd gatekeeping that kept real breakdancers out and only like people that kind of knew about it and were able to kind of game the system to get into the competition. So some of them were fairly impressive, but it's stupid to have as an Olympic event. It was, it's something that was from the 80s and should stay in the 80s, I think. But I think Reagan
I just
kind
think
of
you don't like the judged events, and that you like more clear cut victor
I do
uh,
prefer the clear
in
cut.
general, or but I didn't think about it being like this is a nostalgic thing that should remain in the past. It's not.
Well, it was never
I
quite
hadn't
a
thought of it from that
sport
perspective.
in that way. It would be like it's like having a rap battle in the Olympics, which is another one of those judged things, which I don't think of as I guess certain judge things I
Is
feel
that
like
is that I think you're gonna get credit for this when it's in the 2032 Olympics, the Olympic rap battling, Mike.
yeah,
It's
yeah, I think maybe
it's gonna happen now you've like willed it into existence.
yeah, then I think like Pictionary will be in the Olympics and things of that nature. Um,
Are you
just
suggesting these things to the committee? Because I think
unfortunately
you should have their ear now.
Boggle. I'd like to try to play Boggle in the Olympics. That would be that's the closest I would come. Uh, I'm not as good at Scrabble as MJ. MJ's a lot better at Scrabble than I am. I haven't
Wow.
been able to beat her. I'm
You
decent, but
don't know all the words.
it's a lot of strategy and a lot of play and having the letters and I just haven't been able to put it together. I'll beat her one
So
of these days.
you do not have the best words.
I beat her in
Best
Boggle usually,
words.
but I think this Boggle is faster paced. I can do fast, but if it's slow, I kind of run out of patience.
Wow.
And but
And
stuff
then
like
you just
that,
put
like
down words like cat, so you don't care.
well, if you put cat down and it like connects to like three other words that also are words, that's the way to really win at Scrabble is to make multiple words at once. And if you
Yeah.
can do that,
So you're
that's
gaming the system basically.
yeah.
You're the professor of break dancing culture in the Olympics of Scrabble.
Yeah, I'm not a professor of Scrabble studies, but yeah, my professor of breakdancing culture is pretty lame too. But she was Ray Gun was I think she was one of the memes of the Olympics that took over the second half. I think she may have even supplanted the Turkish shooter as the meme of the Paris 2024 33rd Olympiad. But um, yeah,
You
so that
watched
was
Last Week Tonight, John Oliver show?
I've seen a few episodes. I haven't watched it for a long time.
He brought up a clip from the last week too, from the Olympics of I think it was an Australian maybe skateboarder who had a interview after her event where she said that she wanted to get a duck, that her parents had promised that she would get a duck. And the interview was pretty hilarious, and John Oliver's take on it was pretty funny too. So
Australians
something
are weird. It's
something worth looking up later. Anyway, it's pretty
okay.
funny.
I'll check it out. Well, shall we move on from one to a sport that's no longer hasn't been in the Olympics, but maybe will be again in 2028, and that is baseball. Will be in the Olympics again in 2028 uh, in Los Angeles. But baseball is one of the sports, kind of like soccer, where the best players are not typically playing in the Olympics. Um, and unfortunately, the women were too good at softball, so that kind of kept baseball out of it too, because you need kind of the pairing of baseball and softball. Although I think, as we've talked about many times on this show, that women should play baseball instead of softball because softball was invented as a kind of chauvinistic sport for women because women were not able to play baseball. So they thought. So they developed this lesser game for Victorian fainting women that has, and now it's become kind of a mockery of what that game was because they're far too good to be playing softball. They should be uh, playing baseball, but we digress. But the Royals maybe have not been far too good to be playing softball. Maybe they should be uh, practicing a little bit more. They have been up and down to say the least. They've lost the last two games pretty convincingly to the Twins. I think they lost on Monday 8-3, and they lost 13-3 Tuesday night. And the Twins are the team immediately ahead of the Royals in both the playoff hunt and the division race. What do the Royals need to do better, Dr. Scaff, to catch up with the Twins, or at least maybe put some distance between them and the other wild card contenders in the American League?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate too because Cleveland has lost some games and they've gotten down to I think only like 3.5 back of the division leader, and having these kind of really important games coming up against these like guys that are like immediately ahead of you in the standings. It's really an opportunity to like cement your position there that you're going to be a playoff team, and they starting pitching just hasn't been there in like the last two games at least anyway. Singer and Lugo both had not so great starts. It did seem like they maybe left Lugo in too long today. Like he'd already given up 6 runs, and then they allowed him to load the bases again before they finally pulled him. And then the relief pitcher that came in gave up runs, and then they did the same mistake again when they had that guy go back out for the next inning, and then he gave up runs, and then had to have somebody else come in for him, and then that guy finished the inning giving up Stratton's runs, and then Will Smith gave up his own runs in the next inning, which is getting tiresome. Like these are things that like no one should be doing anyway. Like the bullpen usage situation has not improved. It's just a managerial decision-making thing that has never come along. It's really unfortunate to see them not making the right decisions. Like they're not helping the team from the top down. Like the players are probably okay if they're being used correctly, but they just aren't. And it's not helping.
Yeah, I think another big problem has been Hunter Renfroe has really gone cold again lately. I think he was, when he was playing well, the Royals were playing well, and he's not a great player, but he's very, very hot and cold. And when he's
Yeah.
hot, he's an all-star, but when he's cold, he's like one of the worst players in the league and should not be out there. And I think lately he's been like, I think he's batted like 100 in his last 13 games or something like that. So he's become a liability. And like the Royals did not pick up an outfield bat, partly because Renfroe was starting to hit, but now it seems like it's going cold again. They seems like they need somebody besides Pasquantino's gotten a little cold lately.
Yeah.
Somebody besides Witt, Salvi sometimes they need one more kind of solid bat, I think. But it's surprising that
Consistent. Yeah.
they're still in contention for that wild card, and they still might get it. But it's one of those things where you hope they haven't ruined their best chance, and that like next year maybe they won't be as good, because it seems like that maybe the pitching is coming back to earth now. Lugo hasn't had a very good start lately. Brady Singer's starts lately haven't been quite as good either. Reagan's is still doing pretty well, but
Like Singer, like specifically, has not done well against Minnesota,
hmm.
and so it does seem like maybe they could have, knowing like the schedule ahead of time, they probably could have worked it out so Singer didn't have to face Minnesota even, and but they
Yeah, the
don't they
Royals
don't
have
seem
played.
to they don't seem to think about these things ahead of time. So like I think Singer's ERA against Minnesota is like up around 9 or something, and the rest of the league it's like 3-ish. So like, a significant portion of Singer's ERA is like due to Minnesota, which is
Yeah,
a bit unfortunate, but uh, you know, they did have a weird. Did you notice the weird scheduling thing too? They had a 2-game series against the Cardinals over the weekend, which meant they played Friday, Saturday, then had Sunday off,
Yeah,
which
a
is like
lot of
a
teams had Sundays off because I think because of the interleague play.
bizarre.
It was they play like a lot of teams played the second two games because I think the Royals and the Cardinals are like designated interleague rivals or something like that. So they'll play instead of
Yeah.
one instead of one 3 game series at home or away alternating, they play 2 games at each park.
Home
And
and
so I
away.
guess they
Yeah.
decided to play rather than playing in the middle of the week, they decided to play it on a Friday, Saturday, and leave Sunday off, which is pretty strange. But
Yeah.
maybe the Royals just don't play the Twins well or haven't played them very well this season. They started
Yeah.
out poorly against Minnesota, and then they've kind of continued it. So I don't know how many more games against the Twins do the Royals have.
That I don't know right offhand, but I can pull it up pretty quickly. I think this is the 3 game series. They have the 1 game Wednesday, which is tomorrow for us right now. And then they it looks like they have one series at Minnesota in early September. So
Okay,
that must just be the 4 remaining games against Minnesota.
okay. They
They've
have a
got
lot
a
of.
bunch against Cleveland though.
It's in September. It's at in Kansas City.
Oh, it is in Kansas City, yes.
They
Sorry.
have they have 2 series against Cleveland as well.
3 game
Uh,
series at home and a 4 game series in Cleveland.
yeah, they have a doubleheader the 26th of August. Um, they play home against the Phillies, home against the Angels. Maybe they can get right. They have at the Reds. The Reds
Oof,
have
man, that is a tough stretch. Did you notice this? That
yeah,
stretch?
Phillies, Guardians, Astros,
Yeah, it's 8 games against Cleveland and Houston on the road, both of those, after
and then
playing Philly
Cleveland,
at home.
Twins.
And then they come back for more Cleveland Twins at Yankees at Pittsburgh before
Yeah,
they get Detroit. So that's really their season right there. So August 23rd through September 15th. If they don't go over 500 in that stretch, they're not making the
yeah.
playoffs.
Then they have a little easier. Then they finish at Braves as their last season series, which is a little strange.
Yeah,
That they're finishing with a team that they haven't played at all.
yeah,
But
yeah. Not a division rival, not even a possible, playoff contender within the
yeah,
American League. So
it's
that's
not,
it's
it's not
weird
even a
to
yeah. It's a little strange the way it's like the opposite of the way the NFL usually ends their season because they like to end the season within the division. But
yeah.
yeah, the Royals play. I
Maybe
think they're
maybe they were trying to make it so that you didn't end the season like at Minnesota where it might snow or something if it's like
yes.
early October.
I guess but the Royals I think they're 42 games left in the season, so they're about a fourth of the season left. I think they're 65 and 55 now, so 10 games over 500. If they finish 86 and 76 and they stay 500, that they have a shot, I think, at making the playoffs, but it's not
Yeah.
guaranteed. They need to, I don't know, somehow rack up a few wins here and there, and then kind of stay close to 500 against the better teams. But
Yeah.
it's going to be tough.
And I am really afraid that Michael Lawrence and trade is going to be a disaster. He didn't make it through the 5th inning in the last game, and uh, that doesn't look very good just in general.
Hmm.
So I think maybe like having Marsh be the fifth starter is maybe a better move anyway, just because other teams may not know him, but where everybody knows. Like Lawrence has been around for like a decade, so like everybody's seen him, so they all have like something on him basically, right? They know they have history with him, so I think it may have been better to have the relatively unknown Alec Marsh in there as the fifth starters. I don't strategically, I don't think the Royals know what they're doing like at all, so I don't really expect them to be making the playoffs, but I want to
Well,
be wrong.
we'll find out. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
But one team we do think will make the playoffs is the Kansas City Chiefs. Although maybe with they had a kind of rough preseason game against the Jaguars. They lost the game um, to Jacksonville, which maybe doesn't matter as much, but they also lost Marquise Hollywood Brown to an injury, a sternoclavicular joint displacement, which I think Tyreek Hill had a few years ago, and he was out for a few weeks. And so they maybe expect, I think, Brown to miss 4 to 6 weeks, which includes missing the opening week against his former team, the one of his former teams, the Baltimore Ravens. So maybe that would, so far it also seems like at least Rashee Rice hasn't had a suspension yet, so maybe he won't be suspended the first few games. So maybe they'll have him, but I think it weakens the Chiefs' receiver core, and which is we'll talk about the 53-man roster, what it might turn out to be. But do you have any thoughts about how the Chiefs look after their first preseason game? Anybody stand out? Do you think the Chiefs are looking better now than they did last year at this time, or is it again? Can you just not tell anything from preseason?
I don't think that you can really make any assumptions about the team based on this. I think the starters only really played the first possession, which did end up with a field goal, which is okay. I guess the defense did give up a touchdown, I think, on their first possession, but that was after a long return, I think, on the opening. Uh, their first kickoff resulted in a long return, I guess. So uh, Jacksonville had a short field and was able to still get a touchdown on their first possession. So I think they sort of lost the first team battles, I guess 7-3, if you want to call it that. But I don't know that doesn't mean anything, honestly. So who knows? Uh, you know, it seemed like yeah, I mean it was good to see like Brown get a catch. It was like the first play of the game, I think, wasn't it? He had like made the catch and then took the injury. So, you know, that's a lot to happen there on one play. So it's yeah, really unfortunate. They did say, I guess, today that he does not need surgery though. So that's a good sign, and hopefully
Yes.
means that it won't. Maybe the process won't take quite as long for Eli to make. If it's on the same sort of trajectory, yeah, you'd be back like week 3, I guess, most likely for the Chiefs. If he misses 4 weeks, which is what
Yeah, that would be the
Hill missed, I
Atlanta
think, with a
game.
similar injury.
Missing maybe the two tougher games, Baltimore and then Cincinnati. I think it's Atlanta week 3. Um, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, how much weight do you put on the first game of the preseason, Mike? Does that change your expectations at all, or just worried about the wide receivers?
I'm worried a
Like,
little about the wide receivers, and I wonder if there is going to be, there might be, I don't know if you follow that Juju Smith-Schuster was released by the Patriots. Could they bring him back? He hasn't been very good the last season, and maybe this season, again, not catching on with New England, which is one of the worst teams in the AFC.
probably
Um,
okay.
he played very well though for the Chiefs, his one season with the Chiefs. Did you hear the rumor of the Chiefs trading for CeeDee Lamb? Did you hear that rumor? Um, because he
No, I have not heard
because
that.
because he is of course disgruntled. I guess he guess I guess the Chiefs were not in on the Brandon Ayuk trade rumors, where now it seems like maybe Ayuk has the option of getting traded to Pittsburgh or staying with San Francisco. Uh, do you think Ayuk, if you were Brandon Ayuk, would you stay in San Francisco, or would you go to Pittsburgh and try to get a little bit more money out of the Steelers than you might out of the
Well, he's
uh,
not. I mean, he's under contract, so he's not going to get any more money like immediately. So, I mean, it seems like you just stick with your team that has your best chance of like winning and getting your next contract being, a bigger deal. So, I don't know why you would leave San Francisco unless unless he actually has a problem with somebody there or the franchise and just wants to get out. That's understandable. But if that's not the issue, then I don't know why you wouldn't just stay. for this year and then, play the free agent market and do what you can for the next year. Especially if you have a shot at winning a Super Bowl, why would you not take that? I don't think Pittsburgh has a very good chance at a Super Bowl. Like they could be a playoff team, but the AFC just seems to be really tight anyway. Is that what you would say too, or do you have a different opinion on this?
Um, I think somewhat. I think basically the same thing that you do. I think the problem, I guess, is that if Ayuk is if they franchise him, maybe that would be a like that would hamstring him for a future contract. So that's like if like Ayuk could get an agreement saying, well, we'll play one more year for San Francisco, and if you promise not to, either to offer me a new contract or not to franchise tag me next year, I'll do that. So it's one of those things like, because the next contract that Ayuk is going to get is probably going to be his biggest one. And if he's franchise tagged, he'll get a lot of money that 1 year, but it might hamper his future contract.
He's an unrestricted free agent after this season.
But I think they can be I think he can be franchised because he's just leaving after his deal. I think he can be franchised by the 49ers. So
Okay.
they could do that to him. And so maybe that's something you don't want to happen if you're Ayuk. And maybe if you get assurance that that won't happen uh, somehow. But yeah, I would stay with San Francisco. Like Pittsburgh, you don't have a core like we've talked before. Your quarterback situation's in flux. Looks like Russell Wilson might not even start if he's injured. Fields will be the starter, and the Steelers are more of a running offense and maybe not as consistent. And they're going to have a tough time going to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. The other teams were Cleveland and New England, so those were even worse options probably. And it seemed like if you're the 49ers, they wanted Amari Cooper in return from Cleveland. So like you're getting a player that's almost as good as Ayuk probably, and now you're saddling this huge contract on Cleveland and you're kind of fleecing. That would have been the ideal situation if you were San Francisco. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
we'll get like a first round draft pick and Amari Cooper, who's on a cheaper deal for Brandon Ayuk, who's disgruntled and maybe not any better than Amari Cooper is. And so we can just plug and play him and you know and have him deal with Deshaun Watson or whatever's left of Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. So yeah, yeah, that Ayuk situation is a little strange to me, but he wants he wants more. I think the Patriots offered him. Did you hear what the Patriots offered him? I think they offered him $32 million a season, but he would have to play in New England.
Yeah. Right.
And New England is interesting. Did you see the preseason game? Did you hear about the preseason game in New England? We haven't talked about the quarterbacks in New England yet, but the quarterbacks that they drafted two quarterbacks this year. One was the first rounder, Drake May, and one was like in the sixth round was Joe Milton. And apparently Milton is wowing people more in camp now, and they think that maybe Milton could actually be the starter more soon than May, which would be really interesting.
So are we right back to the Mac Jones Bailey Zappi controversy again?
Yeah, or yeah, I think so. Zappy is still around there somewhere. I'm not sure what he's doing up in New England. Michael McCorkle Jones, of course, has gone to Jacksonville, his hometown. We'll talk about them when we talk about the quarterbacks. Should we move on to talk about the quarterbacks? Or do we have any more Chiefs or NFL news to discuss? JJ McCarthy, who we mentioned last week, had a meniscus tear and is having surgery. So it seems like Sam Darnold will be the starter. At least for the time being in Minnesota.
I think you seemed a little concerned about their quarterback situation last week. Or now, what's your level of concern for Minnesota?
Well, I don't think we had that concern of Minnesota because most of our concern was with if Jordan Love went down, what's Green Bay going to do? If
Yeah.
if something happens in Chicago with they're with Caleb Williams. What are they going to do? Because they don't have anybody really. What happens if Jared Goff goes down? The rest of the division didn't have much, whereas at least Minnesota had options. You had,
Well, they
up and
did
coming
anyway.
Nick Mullins, who's decent. Jaron Hall, who was seen as a main up and coming player, and you have Darnold, who's a decent player. So you have like three options still, even if McCarthy's
Yeah.
not. But they don't have a high peak like the rest of the division does, at least not yet.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and now their ceiling is it's quite a bit lower than too, isn't it? With McCarthy not there. I
John,
mean, it's always blue sky when you have like a rookie quarterback because you have no idea where the ceiling is, right? So,
well,
but
I
if he's
think
going to be
nobody
out,
thought McCarthy might. A lot of people thought McCarthy might not start anyway, and it might be a
yeah,
few weeks until he starts. So we haven't really changed a whole lot, other than maybe it's a definite Darnold situation. And who knows? Darnold was regarded as a prospect who was even better than McCarthy was when he came out of college. So
was he
um,
not a number one overall pick?
he was number
No.
3 overall, I
Yeah,
think, by the Jets. Whereas McCarthy was number, I think, 10 overall by the Vikings. So, and like the fifth
yeah,
quarterback taken. But I think a lot of people like Darnold better than Baker Mayfield that year. They liked him better than Josh Allen that year. They liked him better than Josh Rosen that year. Liked him better than Lamar Jackson. Um, but Darnold, aka Dwight Schrute Jr., has not panned out to be quite as effective. Um, Maybe he'll have to go back to the beet farm if he doesn't work out. If it doesn't work out for him this year in Minnesota, but yeah, do you want to talk about the AFC begin our journey through the AFC quarterbacks, Dr. Scaff?
yeah, let's do it.
Is there more? Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more. But if we have more Chiefs information, we can talk about it when we talk about the Chiefs quarterbacks, because we're discussing the AFC West first. We'll talk about the AFC West and the AFC South. We did the NFC the last 2 weeks. So if you didn't hear those discussions, loyal viewers and listeners, you can go back and check out our lengthy discussions of both the um, of all four NFC divisions, from West, South, to the north, to the east. We're also going from west, south, northeast here in the AFC, and we'll talk about the West and the South today. Starting in the West with the westernmost West team in the AFC, that is now the Los Angeles Chargers. Now that the Raiders have moved to Las Vegas from Oakland, I think Oakland may have been slightly further west than, just given the shape of California,
Yeah,
than Los Angeles was. And now that they've moved to Los Angeles from San Diego, I think the Chargers have moved ever so slightly west as well.
yes,
Mostly a due north move, but it looks like maybe slightly west. The Chargers, of course, have as their starting quarterback one Justin Herbert, 6'6". He's now 26 years old. Excuse me. He was drafted number 6 overall in 2020, behind Joe Burrow, who was number 1 overall to Cincinnati, and Tua Tagovailoa, who was 5th overall to Miami that year, but ahead of Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts, who have both had successful careers so far. So far, the 2020 quarterback class has been very good. All 5 of those quarterbacks picked in the first couple of rounds have had solid careers and have also gotten big contracts now. Um, Herbert played in college for Oregon. He was a part-time starter for 2 years, full-time starter for 2 years. He's been a 4-year starter in Los Angeles. He has a 30-32 record, 0-1 though in the playoffs in that big famous collapse that the Chargers had against Jacksonville in the 2022 playoffs. Last year, he started only 13 games because he had a finger injury that limited him. He had surgery on that finger, but he only passed for 20 touchdowns, but only 7 interceptions, 93.2 rating, 3,134 yards passing. So not a great year for him by his standards, but he only played 13 games. He averaged about 4,700 yards passing, 31 touchdowns, 12 interceptions in the 3 years before that. So he's a solid to maybe even great starting quarterback. But the question is, can he elevate his teammates? Can he win playoff games? how much will Harbaugh help this situation? But he hasn't been able to kind of get his team over the hump. And he's had some talented skill position players, and he won't have those this year. He doesn't have Keenan Allen anymore. Doesn't Mike Williams anymore. Of course, those guys were injured as often as they were healthy, but he also doesn't have Austin Eckler anymore. So it's a question mark of what's going on in Los Angeles with Justin Herbert. What do you think, Dr. Scafluth, about Herbert?
Yeah, it's the thing that I would be mostly afraid of now is that, he did take his first injury last year. So we have seen with some quarterbacks that have, long histories of being healthy or playing through injuries that, once they start to get injured, they sometimes continue to get injured, maybe pick up other injuries or get the same recurring thing. So that's the thing that I'm most worried about, I think, right now, is, having him be more continually injured, which is what they're hoping to avoid, I think, mostly. But yeah, it's going to be a lot more difficult though. Like they're going to have to figure out who the reliable players are on offense now that basically everybody else is gone. So that's going to be tough. And I don't know what to expect from him or the team really this year. It's become more of a question mark. Maybe
Yeah,
even
you
more of a
think?
question mark than like Denver typically is with their
Yeah,
weird things. So
you
uh
think with Harbaugh they have a better coach than they did with Brandon Staley, but they also maybe have a worse roster, at least on the offensive side of things, than they did last year. So it's hard to say what is going to
but the
happen.
worst roster is like leftover from like bad contracts that they had to clear to be able to like stay under the cap too. It's not like they weren't able to sign anybody. It was like they had to expiring deals and decisions to make, right? To clear space to actually field a team, right? Because the it seemed like we're having difficulty with more on the contract side of things than the players themselves. So yeah, I think a lot of that was just like office moves more than anything else to you
Yeah,
know, pushing this big change, at least anyway, for this season.
yeah, it's been yeah, it's an interesting time in Los Angeles the last year. So I think people are expecting big things because it's Harbaugh, but maybe this is not the year to expect those big things. But if Herbert stays healthy, they're still a solid team. Um, their backup situation's kind of interesting. We don't know really. I don't know exactly who they think is going to be the top backup. Maybe they I'm sure they have a better idea than we do. They have three backup quarterbacks. The first one is Easton Stick, 6'1". He's 29 in September, former fifth round pick in 2019. He was a 4-year starter at North Dakota State. He was the starter between Carson Wentz, who we'll talk about with the Chiefs, and Trey Lance, who we talked about with the Cowboys. He had a 49-3 career record in college. He was a dual threat quarterback in college. His first significant playing time actually came last year when Herbert went down. He started 4 games in place of Herbert, lost all 4 of those games, but he didn't play terribly poorly, though. He had 1,100 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 85.6 rating, also a rushing touchdown. The big problem, though, he was sacked 14 times, lost 4 fumbles. Some of those sacks and fumble losses, I think, occurred in the final game of the season against the Chiefs when the when Kansas City was starting Blaine Gabbert in that final game that the Chiefs ended up winning. It didn't matter for the division, didn't matter for playoff seedings. So the Chiefs didn't have Mahomes or Kelsey playing. But Chris Jones famously played in that game to get his sack that he needed to get his $2 million bonus or whatever it was. So
Right.
I think one of those was he sacked Easton Stick, one of your favorite names, I believe, of any NFL quarterback.
Ridiculous. How can that be a name?
Stick Easton. Um, yeah, then we have maybe we'll talk about all 3 of these quarterbacks together since I don't think any of them individually are um, hugely. We can talk about we'll talk about their salaries together, which uh, you have the information on, which might give us information on uh, inklings on ones the Chargers are more likely to keep. They also have Max Duggan, 6'1", 23 years old, 2023 seventh round pick from TCU. He was a 4-year starter, practice squad last year. As a senior at TCU, he led the team to the national title game, where of course they were blown out by Georgia that year. He had 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 12-2 record, 3,700 yards passing, 9 rushing touchdowns. A prolific college player. Could he challenge for a backup spot, or does he get bumped this year by somebody else? Is he a Brock Purdy in waiting, or is he just a kind of camp body, perpetual third string quarterback type? And he's not the only third string quarterback that's kind of around. And now they have the Chargers brought in Luis Perez, whom I had never heard of, Luis Perez, but he's been around for a long time. He's been everywhere. He's 30 years old in late August. He played for Southwestern California Junior College, and also Texas A&M Commerce. Have you heard of that institution?
It's surprising that they would have a football team.
They were a Division II team in 2015. In 2017, he was the Division II Harlan Hill Trophy winner. So that was the kind of Heisman Trophy winner of Division II. They won the Division II national championship that year. Undrafted free agent by the Rams in 2018. He's been with the Rams, and basically every other football league that's been in existence since over the last 10 years. He played for the Birmingham Iron and the Association of American Football. The Eagles, the Lions, the LA Wildcats of the XFL, the New York Guardians of the XFL, the New Jersey Generals of the USFL, the Rams again, the Vegas Vipers, the Arlington Renegades, now the Chargers. He's been a former XFL MVP and champion in 2023, the UFL passing leader in 2024 with 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 2,300 plus yards in 10 games, 99.4 rating. So is he who is he? Is he a backup? Is he a camp body? Is he a late bloomer? Is he somebody that they can, throw in as a backup? I don't really know what they're going to do with Perez or Stick or Duggan. What did the salary facts tell us, Andrew?
Well, not much really. So Herbert is the obvious biggest contract out there for the Chargers. Herbert's making 19.3 million this year. His contract's going to like nearly double, I think, for next season up to like around 37 million. Easton Stick is making 1.3 million this season, and then Luis Perez and Max Duggan have the same deal apparently, 795K for this season. So they're not. There's no edge there from the financial side as to what to expect. Uh, I guess maybe the best thing we can look to as to like who played in what order in the preseason game. It
Yeah.
looks like Herbert did not play, which is not terribly surprising, as most teams don't necessarily start their starters in the first game. But Easton Stick looks like he played the whole first half. And then Duggan started the second half. No, second quarter. No, sorry, yeah. It was just the first quarter that Stick played. No. No. He played 2 quarters. Yes. In quarter 2. Yeah, so Duggan played the third quarter. And
That's mopped up.
looks like Luis Perez took over in the fourth.
That's if you go to the Chargers website, their depth chart has them in the list that I listed them, and that we just listed them as it has Herbert, then Stick, then Duggan, then Perez. But
That is the order they played in. Stick did not have a terribly good game. He was only 5 of 13, 31 yards in an interception, was sacked twice in the first half. So that's fits pretty much with exactly what you just said
yeah, he's a bit of
about
a
his last
stick
season.
in the mud. Something
Mm.
that's but we'll see if that. Yeah, none of those guys are. Perez is pretty old for a fourth quarterback, and this kind of just bringing in. He's 30, or almost 30. Stick is not a spring chicken either, but yeah, it's the Chargers, they don't have a veteran backup who has been like a longtime player in the NFL. And they also don't really have they have some couple they have I guess Duggan's maybe the young up and comer, but it's interesting. They don't have that kind of older veteran or like veteran with a lot of experience, like something like the Chiefs have, as we'll talk about, or something that the Texans have, or the Colts, or something like that. Where so
Right.
maybe that's a weakness in the quarterback room, but maybe something that Harbaugh thinks he can handle because he's a former quarterback himself. So they don't need a lot of if they have older guys, they don't need playing experience to be in that quarterback room. But those are the Chargers. Yeah, if Herbert goes down, I think the Chargers are pretty much sunk. Um,
They may
I
be
don't.
sunk anyway, but
Yeah,
they
yeah,
may it may be even worse. Yeah.
yeah,
But Harbaugh's won basically everywhere he's been, so it would be
yeah,
kind of surprising if he, doesn't seem to turn them around at least somewhat relatively quickly.
yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
what the expectation is because he has basically won everywhere he's been and right away. So
yeah. Well, if
yeah,
Herbert stays healthy, maybe he can carry the team. But
yeah.
that's the only hope I think that the Chargers have. Um, the Raiders, on the other hand, don't really have a penciled in starter as of yet. They also don't have somebody with the upside of Herbert either. They have four quarterbacks on their roster. Um, they brought in, I'm going to list Gardner Minshew first, since they brought him in uh, from uh, from the Colts. He's 6'1". He's 28 years old. Sixth-round draft pick in 2019 by Jacksonville. He played his last year at Washington State. Formerly played for East Carolina and Northwest Mississippi Community College. Uh, he's played for Jacksonville, then the Eagles, and the Colts last year. Now the Raiders. The question is he the starter or the backup? He was actually a Pro Bowl quarterback last year. Uh, Career 15-22 record as a starter. 90.2 quarterback rating, which is pretty solid. 59 touchdowns, 24 interceptions. Last year, he replaced the injured quarterback for the Colts, Anthony Richardson, for most of the season. It was a little surprising he wasn't the starter to begin with, simply because we didn't think Richardson was pretty raw. But
Mhm.
Minshew finished with a 7-6 record, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 3,305 yards. Again, he's kind of a borderline slash okay starter or a very top quality backup. And, um, that seems like what the Raiders have. They have kind of borderline starters, good backups as the kind of limit. Um, so well, maybe we'll mention Minshew and then we'll mention his competitor for the starting job, Aiden O'Connell, and then you can talk about the salary uh, discrepancies or the salary information on these two players. Next, they have Aiden O'Connell. He's 6'3". He'll be 26th on September 1st. So he's not a young guy, even though this is only going to be his second year in the league. Fourth round draft pick by Las Vegas from Purdue last year. He was a 2-year starter at Purdue. He was the former backup to current Panthers backup Jack Plummer, forcing Jack Plummer to transfer to Cal and then Louisville. He was behind Jimmy Garoppolo last year to begin the season, but made the starter. He started 10 games, 5-5 record, including a victory against the Chiefs, although he didn't complete a pass after the first quarter against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Uh, 2,200 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 83.9 rating. So the question is, what is he? Can he develop into a starter, or is he just is his ceiling a decent backup? Does he have more potential than Minshew? He seems less mobile than Minshew, although Minshew isn't really a big threat to run himself. But this is who do you pick? Do you pick O'Connell, who's young? We don't know exactly what he's got. Do you pick Minshew, who has maybe capability of being streaky and exciting? Um, so what do you think the Raiders are going to do between Minshew and O'Connell? I've heard maybe O'Connell is the likely starter, but I don't know if I would start him over Minshew. I think Minshew has had more success. I think Minshew still might. He's only 2 years older than O'Connell. He might have more upside at this point too. So,
Yeah.
with uh, Minshew and O'Connell.
Yeah, well, it seemed like everything that the Raiders have like mentioned to make it sound like they want O'Connell to be the guy. So like it seems like he's getting every opportunity to be the starter, regardless of maybe anything that anyone else is saying outside the organization too. So yeah, it seems to me, and I think what basically echoing what you just said, it seems like Minshew probably is a better starter right now. So I don't know why you wouldn't use him to begin with. For the first preseason game, though, O'Connell did take the first team snaps, and then Minshew came in the second quarter. So I mean, it looks like the Raiders are following what they had more or less said at the end of last year, and look like they're proceeding with O'Connell being the presumed starter at least from the beginning. But Minshew had a pretty good game. He was 6 of 12, 117 yards and a touchdown, good for a 112 rating in the limited play. But O'Connell wasn't bad. 7 of 9, 76 yards in like basically just one drive, 102 rating. So, maybe they are like closer together than we think anyway. But yeah, salary wise, O'Connell's way back, second on this list anyway for salary. Gardner Minshew they brought in uh looks like he's going to make 8 million this year. O'Connell's barely just over a $1 million deal, but
He's
that's
on a fourth
because
year rookie
he's
deal. Yeah, fourth
yes
round rookie deal.
set
Yeah,
from that rookie deal contract that comes along with the draft pick. So uh you know there's been nothing to like reward him with his own contract that's different than the standard one that's been given it for the draft pick. So yeah, I still think it seems like it would make more sense if you want to try to like get off to a good start is to actually use Mitch early. Doesn't that seem
yeah, but I guess the Raiders, you think, well, they're developing players and they aren't gonna, they aren't gonna challenge for a playoff spot this year. So you maybe want to develop,
yeah,
see what you have in him. But like, but really, if you look at their ages, like you could say Minshew has as much chance to be a long-term starter as O'Connell. He's only 2 years older,
yeah,
and I think from what I've seen, I think Minshew has had sparks of excellence in his career, and I don't know if O'Connell has had that, but I maybe it's just because I like the mustache of Minshew and Minshew mania. A I think of him as being kind of a Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of quarterback, somebody who can be a good starter, but maybe somebody who's just going to keep bouncing around all the time, um, and never going to really get a real shot at being a long-term starter for anybody. Um,
but another
but
guy with a mania
yeah,
associated with Fitzmania too, right?
It's
So
magic. Yeah,
it's
and the
magic.
beard,
Oh, it's
also
magic.
also facial hair. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, we have two other quarterbacks on the roster. Neither of them are really going to challenge for the starting role. Maybe one of them will land a practice squad gig, um, or maybe both on the practice squad. We have Anthony Brown as the third quarterback listed, I think. 6'1", 26 years old, undrafted free agent from Oregon, 2022 by Baltimore. He played a little bit in 22, didn't play at all last year. This is his first year with the Raiders. He played for Boston College as well as Oregon in college. He was a dual threat quarterback at Oregon. He passed uh, his last season for 29, more than almost 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, rushed for 658 yards and 9 touchdowns. He started one game for Baltimore after Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley were both hurt. He had 302 yards passing, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, only a 48.2 quarterback rating. Looks like he's penciled in for number 3. Or do you think maybe he has more upside, Anthony Brown? I don't know. But it seems like he's not gonna beat out either O'Connell or Minshew for the backup role. He's the third guy. And the fourth guy probably is Carter Bradley, not to be confused with Bradley Carter, but Carter Bradley, 6'1", 24 years old, undrafted free agent from South Alabama. He played at Toledo before that, 2 years at USA. Did you know that the University of South Alabama, one of their chances, USA, because it's University of South Alabama. 47 touchdowns in those 2 years, 19 interceptions, 6,000 yards, 66 completion percentage. But he's not a running threat. Is he just a camp body, or is he developmental quarterback? This is one of those cases where maybe the Raiders weren't too happy with their number 3 and 4 options. So it was revealed today, Tuesday, August 13th. This will air probably on Thursday, the 15th. But Nathan Peterman, who had been released since we talked about Nathan Peterman with New Orleans Saints, the Saints finally saw enough of Peterman, but the Raiders haven't gotten enough of Peterman apparently, so they brought Nathan Peterman back as probably their third quarterback. I don't really want to go over Nathan Peterman's journey into through the NFL anymore, but if you want to talk, you want to hear us talk about Nathan Peterman more, simply tune into last week's episode on the NFC South, or 2 weeks ago on the NFC South, where we talked about Nathan Peterman. But back to the Raiders, one of John Gruden's old favorites. Did you see that John Gruden was at the Chiefs practice a lot this week and dressed in Chiefs attire for several days? Did you find that interesting?
I was surprised to hear that more than anything else. Doesn't seem like, a guy that you would expect to see in the Chiefs camp anyway. So
He was an old friend of Andy Reid from their days in Green Bay, I believe. So
yeah,
as assistants under Mike Holmgren in Green Bay. But yeah, interesting seeing the former Raiders coach dressed in Chiefs attire.
right, exactly. It just seems a little strange. Two-time Raiders
I
coach
believe
too,
he used
not even just a one-time Raider coach, but a two different time Raider coach, right?
So the Raiders. Any comments on Peterman, Brown, or Bradley? I don't know what Peterman's new contract status is.
Yeah, it's not, they don't have it in spot track yet, but Anthony Brown's making just a little bit more money than Carter Bradley, 915K to 803. Uh so Anthony Brown did play a little bit at the end of the preseason, their first preseason game. He did get 3 attempts. He was 1 for 3 for 24 yards, but was sacked 3 times
That's not good.
in limited, visibility, I guess, anyway. So they did play a close game though with Minnesota. And that must have been the game where, yeah, McCarthy looks like McCarthy had a great game, but
Yeah, I think they were
apparently the
thinking
knee
that he
injury.
might win the starting job because of that great first preseason, but he ended up
Yeah.
hurting his knee and probably will be out for at least a few weeks into the beginning of the season. With a meniscus tear is not a huge surgical recovery. He doesn't have a huge recovery time anymore, but I think it still takes a few weeks at least to
They,
get over.
they don't always know how much damage is there until they get in to actually do the surgery. So if it's just like cleaning up a little bit, then maybe it'll be relatively quick back to the field. But yeah, sometimes they find other stuff when they get in there too.
Yeah, so the Raiders are one of those teams that don't really have maybe a great starting option, but they have decent-ish maybe but it's hard to say. I think we have the same issue with the Denver Broncos. We don't have great starting options, but we have kind of mediocre options all the way around. It's a little more complicated, I think, in Denver because we have three potentially mediocre options instead of just two. Although I guess Denver would say we have two mediocre options, and then we have one of those mediocre options that has upside later. But as I think maybe it will become revealed, according to my analysis, I don't think that Bo Nix has a lot of upside, and he's just as old as some of these older guys, some of these other players that have been deemed washed up already. So,
Is that a spoiler? Are you giving us a spoiler right there?
spoiler alert. Yeah, my
Yes.
spoiler alert. Uh, um, Yeah, so I have so I'm gonna list who I think should probably start for the Denver Broncos if I were wanting the team to be most competitive. And that I think is actually Jarrett Stidham, uh, who has been in the Denver system for the longest. He's 28. He's 6'3", former fourth round pick by New England in 2019 from Auburn. Earlier, Baylor. Actually, Bo Nix replaced or was followed Jarrett Stidham as starter at Auburn when he started. So he is not terribly, he's not that much younger than Jarrett Stidham. He was with New England for 3 years through 21, the Raiders in 22. This is his second season now in Denver. He started 4 games over the last 2 seasons, 1-3 record, 1,422 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 78.3 career rating, but an 88 career rating in his starts. He started the last 2 games of the season after Russell Wilson was benched. Is he the starter maybe, at least at first? Who knows? The Broncos also brought in Zach Wilson, who I think also maybe has as much or more upside still than the next guy we'll mention is Bo Nix. He's 25. He's actually only 6 months older than Bo Nix. This is I think he's entering his 4th NFL season now, and he's only 6 months older than Bo Nix. Former number 2 overall pick by the New York Jets from BYU. Great college career. In his final season in 2020, he had 33 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, 37 yards, 100 yards passing in 12 games. He struggled in the pros, however. 12-21 record as a starter, 23 touchdowns to 25 interceptions, 73.2 rating. Last year, he started 11 games for the Jets in place of the injured Aaron Rodgers, who got injured famously in the first series that he played again for the Jets last year. 60.1% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 77.2 quarterback rating. But he's shown flashes. I think if you watch that game against the Chiefs that he played, he looked really, really good against the Chiefs.
Mm,
Yeah, and the Chiefs, of course, it turned out to have one of the best defenses in the league, and you wonder how but for 3 quarters of that game that Wilson played, he looked, the Jets probably should have beaten the Chiefs in that game.
yeah.
But he still does he still have potential, or is he a head case? He's still only 6 months older than Bo Nix, the first round draft pick of the um of the Broncos, who I am not as high on Bo Nix as anybody else as the Broncos are apparently, but
Well, I was just going to ask, is the Zach Wilson issue just the Jets issue, and it has nothing to do with him? It's just
yeah, you have Darnold who flamed out there. You have everybody flames out for the Jets. The Jets are one of the star-crossed, I think,
yeah.
NFL franchises, and
Aaron
you
Rodgers had a short season last year too. It's
yeah. We'll see what he does this year with the Jets,
yeah.
but if he can complete the season. But yeah, this brings us to Bo Nix, who is 24 years old, 6'2", the 12th overall pick by the Broncos. But he was actually the 6th quarterback taken. So there are 5 quarterbacks in the draft class that were seen as better than Bo Nix. The only quarterback seen as better than Zach Wilson was Trevor Lawrence in that draft class. So you can kind of, but Nix replaced Stidham as the starter at Auburn. He was a 3-year starter there. He didn't really live up to expectations, but then he was a 2-year starter at Oregon, where he really blossoms. His senior year at Oregon, he 12-2 record last year, 4,500 yards passing, 45 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, 77.4% completion percentage, which is an NCAA record. So he did really, really well in the Oregon system. But he's also he's also an older quarterback competing against younger kids at that point. He started 61 games in college, the most in NCAA history for a quarterback. Is he the starter coming in, or does he wait? I think the most interesting thing about Bo Nix is that he has the shortest name of any NFL player or quarterback ever. Bo is his full first name. His middle name is
Oh,
Chapman.
BO, not BAU. Bo. Oh,
Bonix. BO. So 5 letters in his full name. Um, Ty Law, I remember for the Chiefs and for the Patriots, also had only 5 letters, but Ty was actually short for Tyrone. So he had and it's the shortest name in NFL draft history, at least tied with Ed Lee, who was drafted in 1950 He had 5. I'm sure Ed was probably short for Edward or Edgar or something like that. So Bo Nix has the shortest name in NFL history. That might be the only superlative, I think, though, about Bo Nix. I am not impressed by Bo Nix, but I think Sean Payton is, and I think he sees Nix as the next Drew Brees. He was, very high completion percentage, very, a lot of short passes. I don't, I, I don't know if that works terribly well in the NFL any longer, but I think you need some athleticism, some big playability. I'm not sure if Nix has that. I I think Stidham and Wilson have as much or more upside than Nix does. I'm pretty down. But as a Chiefs fan, maybe I hope that Nix is made the starter because I think I don't think that much of Nix. What do you think of the Broncos'
Okay.
3 quarterback choices here?
It doesn't seem to be all that impressive. It does seem like, Stidham was going to get a chance somewhere, right? Like it was seemed like he was the guy that was going to get an opportunity. So it's not surprising that he got an opportunity somewhere, but yeah, Denver, fine, whatever. But what do you think the order of usage was in their opening preseason game? Then do you think it was
I think it probably went
Nick's getting
Stidham. I
first
think when
snaps, or do you think it was
Stidham.
someone else getting first snaps?
I would say it went Stidham first, then Nix, then Wilson. I think Wilson they brought third, but I don't think Wilson. I think probably Wilson has the most upside of any of those 3 quarterbacks still. Um, but I think
Well,
Stidham probably has the combination of being savvy enough with a decent. I think I don't. Yeah, it's like we said, the Broncos. I think are kind of in the same boat as the Raiders. They have quarterbacks that could be decent as at their highest level, but probably aren't going to be amazing. Um,
yeah,
and I think like the Raiders, the Broncos are probably going to pick the person that they shouldn't pick. Uh, so I think the Raiders are
yeah.
going to pick O'Connell, where I think it should be Minshew. I think the Broncos are going to pick Nix, where I think it should be either Wilson or Stidham. I would pick Nix third out of
Flip a
those 3.
coin, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I'm not a professional football coach. But sitting on the couch, that's how I would see that. I remember Bo Nix at Auburn. He wasn't that great, and then finally he comes out of his shell at Oregon. But again, like by that point, you're playing against 18-year-old kids and you're 23, 24 years old. Like
Yeah.
it's not as impressive.
Oh,
You're gonna, you know, when Zach Wilson had his great year in college, he was like 21, and when Nix does it, he's 2 or 3 years older. So
no.
I don't really like the old quarterback draft, like being drafted. I think you want someone on the younger end coming out of college if you're
You
gonna.
want more upside,
Yeah,
less like sure thing, more upside though, is what it sounds like.
yeah, like Nix is older than, he's older than CJ Stroud. He's older than um Anthony Richardson. He's as old as Zach Wilson, who's been around for 4 years. He's older than, a lot of NFL quarterbacks already. Um, so it's it's not as impressive to me. So that's
Just out of curiosity, we can play a little game with the stats here from the first preseason game. I'll read the stat lines. You see if you can tell me which quarterback it is that had the stat line based on your expectation.
I heard
Or did you
some
already, did you
I
already
heard
look?
some things about the game, but I don't know specific details.
So we'll just see what you think of this anyway. So they had a very good game. It seems like from their quarterback position, 3 quarterbacks all having above 50% completion percentage and at least okay yards per attempt. But 15 of 21, 125 yards and a touchdown. Uh, Quarterback in this case, we'll just call him quarterback B. Was 10 of 13 for 117 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Nobody was sacked either, which is, good for a preseason game, especially. Quarterback C, 4 of 7, 37 yards, but an interception.
I'm gonna guess Wilson was the last one who threw the interception.
But only 4 of 7 though.
He
That's,
didn't play very much. Yeah.
yeah. So
I think they pick. I'm gonna say Nix was the most. He threw the touchdown pass. I'm gonna say Nix threw the touchdown, and then Stidham was the other one. But so I, yeah, I. So they start Nix.
Stidham started, and he
Okay.
was the one that only went 4 for 7 with the interception. So he would have
Oh,
faced the number one
okay.
defense, the Colts is who they faced in their first preseason game. So Stidham had the weakest line, but it would have been against the toughest competition. Nix was the 15 for 21 with a touchdown, and he went second. And so he started like around the second quarter or so. And then Zach Wilson was last, 10 of 13 for 117 yards. So his maybe inflated yards per attempt may have been because he was facing a third string defenses, and he's a relatively seasoned veteran at this point too. So he's got a lot more experience than most third string quarterbacks would have against third string defenses.
Yeah.
Uh,
So we'll see what happens, I guess. But I think Denver wants Nix to be the starter. I think they want
yeah,
Nix, and I don't see how Nix is any better. I was surprised that they drafted Nix because I think they already have two Nixes on the roster, in Stidham and Wilson, and I don't know why you bring a third if you have, I think, limited upside, but still some potential on. I think with Wilson, you still have a little more upside than Stidham even, but I don't
yeah.
see I don't see Nix is just as old as those guys, and he doesn't have NFL experience, and I don't think he's gonna be any better. He was yeah, so I question the draft pick of Nix. Um, if you're drafting, I think I can see why the Broncos wanted a quarterback because they don't have a great quarterback, but they're drafting a quarterback who is the sixth best of the quarterbacks available, and when you're picking number 12, you can usually get better than the sixth best at some position
At
that's
any position.
available.
Yeah.
And when you already have quarterbacks that are just as good, and you could bring it, if I were the Broncos, I would have brought in Ryan Tannehill. And I think he has, at least some history as a starter that's solid if you want somebody. And if you want a quarterback for the future, maybe draft one next year if they're going to suck again. And
Well,
maybe
they,
it'll be
they might have even been able to get Knicks later in the draft if they just waited. Because I mean, nobody else is really looking to pick up quarterbacks that
The Raiders
high.
maybe were.
Maybe, but they seem to like a Connell for some reason. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have drafted a
Nobody
Knicks
picked a quarterback
anyway.
until the fifth round after Nix was gone. So
Yeah. So I mean,
but sure,
maybe the Broncos still could have drafted a solid, almost immediate plug and play starter because so many quarterbacks have gone so early. And then they could have still picked up Knicks in the second or third or fourth round without even really a risk for losing your opportunity to get the guy that if he's the guy they wanted anyway, then
yeah.
he
They,
probably
they
would have still been available. But you don't know that for sure.
They could have gotten
The only
Brock
way to
Bowers, the tight end that the Raiders got. The Raiders actually picked Bowers. They already had a great tight end, but and Michael Mayer, who was picked last year, I think first or second round. So
yeah,
they got a second tight end, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But they picked somebody who thought maybe was a top five talent at I think 13 or 14, wherever the Raiders ended up drafting. So, and the Broncos, they don't have a great tight end. So maybe they could have gotten somebody like that, or they could have gotten a lineman, somebody else. Yeah, I am not on board really with what the Broncos did in that draft. But as a Chiefs fan, I'm not unhappy about it.
yeah,
Of course, this could all blow up in our face, and Bo Nix could be the next great quarterback in the NFL. But I think we've been mostly right about our quarterbacks and which ones have been good. I think we were the first, I think, believe to hype up Justin Herbert as being better than Tua, um, and he turns out I think he has been. even though he hasn't played on playoff teams in the way that Tua has. I think we also were,
Yeah.
we were wrong maybe about Jordan Love, it turns out, but
I
but
still remember that Jordan Love wasn't even the best
that was
quarterback
mainly
named
though.
Love in his second tier conference.
But that was also before I believe we knew that Aaron Rodgers was like a colossal grade A sort of douche, uh, and that's why they drafted him because
Yes.
we thought Aaron Rodgers was a great quarterback and still had some years left on him, and why draft this other quarterback there? But
Yeah.
I think maybe we
It
were
was it was a dumb thing to do for the franchise because they probably could have picked somebody else later also, and that wouldn't have been so infuriating because
well, they could have gotten Love maybe a
the
little later. They traded up to get Love.
one, but the whole like you know Packers fan base had just gone through the same thing with Rodgers and Favre just not that long ago.
Yeah,
So it's why put everybody through the same thing again where you're sort of like divide your fan base somewhat against your franchise, for just making everybody feel uncomfortable about the situation that they're creating by drafting a replacement for a guy that's in theory in his prime, but if they didn't want Rodgers around, they just get rid of him or do
yeah,
what you need to make him move on. But you know, this whole sort of backhanded way about going, about the replacement by moving up in the draft to draft his replacement without telling them or that kind of thing is, you know, not how you're supposed to run an organization if you want your people to be okay with you.
yeah.
So
It's a little better maybe than what happened with Atlanta. At least you didn't sign a quarterback and then trade up to draft Michael Penix Jr. Uh,
yeah,
I don't know which. Maybe the Bo Nix pick was not the worst of the first round quarterback draft picks. I think maybe Penix was the worst one. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
Nix was. I don't. Yeah, we'll find out maybe after a couple of years which of these quarterbacks has actually turned out to be solid. But we know in Kansas City we have the Chiefs have the best quarterback in the league, and that's Patrick Mahomes, who was when he was picked a controversial draft pick. He was picked number 10 overall in 2017 out of Texas Tech when the Chiefs had Alex Smith, a solid quarterback. He'll be 29 in September, 6'2". He's had 6 years as a starter, a 74-22 record in the regular season, a 15-3 playoff record. One of the few players who's actually better in the playoffs against stiffer competition than he is in the regular season. 103.5 career rating in the regular season, 105.8 in the playoffs. Last year was a down year for him. 10-6 regular season record, 4,200 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, but a career high in rushing yards of 389, plus another 141 in the playoffs. Also a career best in completion percentage of 67.2%. So a two-time MVP, three-time Super Bowl MVP. He had maybe one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the league last year that led the league in drops. Turned at least two or three easy catches into touchdowns for the other team. Lots of big drops and big, I'm sure two or three games where you could say the MVS drop against the Eagles cost them that game. The Kadarius Toney offside cost them that game. Kadarius Toney interception or drop that turned into a pick six against the Lions cost them that game. So that's if they had decent wide receiver play, they would have won three more games than they lost last year. I think that's
yeah,
pretty easy. So you'd be saying, well, the Chiefs would have been 14-3 rather than 11-6 last year. They would have had the top seed, and they still won the Super Bowl with Mahomes. Maybe Mahomes is entering this season with a chip on his shoulder because he was revealed as the number 4 player in the NFL top 100, actually behind Tyreek Hill, who was number 1 somehow, Lamar Jackson number 2 and Christian McCaffrey number 3. Mahomes only number 4, which seems a little silly. Maybe that shows what players actually know about other players. Maybe not a whole lot, but
Well, especially when you just brought up that 3-time Super Bowl MVP. That's a pretty tough one to get around
yeah, he had
when,
won the MVP in the Super Bowl the previous season. So, like, even though he was having a
yeah,
down year, you don't think Lamar Jackson's a better player than Mahomes. So it's you wonder what the voting is like and how much kind of nitpicking, like do people just dislike Mahomes because he always wins, so they're going to vote? But it turns out this is probably just another thing to kind of motivate Mahomes, who seems to have this kind of Michael Jordan level of competitiveness, that he's less of a jerk, I think, to his teammates than Jordan was, but he has a similar level of competitiveness to Jordan.
yeah, maybe driven a bit by spite to some
Yeah,
extent.
yeah.
That's
Uh,
fine.
so the Chiefs have Mahomes. What do they have? So unlike the Raiders or the Broncos, they have a quarterback who was at the top of his game, on top of the league. They actually have a backup who's as good probably as any of the quarterbacks on those other two rosters as well. Carson Wentz, 6'5", 31 years old now, former second overall pick from North Dakota State by the Eagles in 2016. He's with the Eagles for 5 seasons through 2020, the Colts in 21, the Commanders in 22, and the Rams last year. This is his first season with the Chiefs. Actually, his second season as a backup. He came in midseason to the Rams behind Stafford last year. Career record as a starter: 47, 45, and 1, 153 touchdowns to 67 interceptions. He's been a top of the line starter, probably most notably in 2017 for the Eagles. He had 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Maybe was the favorite to win the MVP that year, but he was injured before the Eagles Super Bowl run when Nick Foles led them to the championship. Who knows if Wentz could have done the same? Even in 2021 in Indy, he passed for about 3,600 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a 94.6 quarterback rating. So he seems like he's a very solid backup. He has some injury history, but can he revitalize his career in Kansas City, or is he just a backup now? It's kind of hard to say, but it would probably take a Mahomes injury to find out. But you think, though, even if Mahomes goes down, Wentz is somebody who for 2 or 3 games probably can keep the Chiefs in these games and not just chalk up games, not just chalk up these as losses. So Wentz is, I think one of the best backups probably in the league that we've gone through so far.
Well, and the best backup the Chiefs have had over the last several years too. Like he should be more, uh, inspiring more confidence in Chiefs fans that if something were to happen to Mahomes, that it's not a disaster. That then
Yeah,
there wasn't previous seasons. They had competent
yeah,
quarterbacks
Henny
behind
was
this.
okay,
Wentz
but he
actually was
was
pretty good. Yeah,
his highs were never as high as Wentz's.
yeah.
Gabbert's highs were never as high as Wentz's either. Um, Maybe Nick Foles as the backup to Alex Smith, or I guess probably the best backup the Chiefs had was Patrick Mahomes to Alex Smith. But Nick Foles maybe as the backup to Alex Smith was maybe the best kind of traditional backup that the Chiefs have had for the last 10 years.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think Wentz is better than that. You know,
yeah,
other than Mahomes himself as the backup, I think Wentz is the best backup the Chiefs have had for a while.
yeah.
Uh, and the battle for the third quarterback. How much is Wentz making this year?
2.7 million.
Would you rather? Yeah, this question is: would you rather have Wentz for 2.7, or would you rather have Gardner Minshew
Zach
for?
Zach Wilson's also making 2.7 million for
Is
so
Wilson still on his rookie deal, or is he on his own?
that I did not look up. He is, yes. It looks like he is still on his brutal deal. Yeah, it looks like the his option was not picked up for 2025, which that decision had to be made in the off season here. So yeah, so that means he's still on his rookie deal. So this will become his final season of his rookie deal.
Yeah, so there's a Wentz. Yeah, I think. Well, you might think Wilson has a lot of upside still, but yeah, I like having Wentz at 2.7 is a pretty good deal for a backup. I think.
Yeah,
Uh, I think Wentz probably
especially with
wants.
that much experience
Mhm.
and you know, success too.
The question is injury. He's had some back injuries and some other injuries, but but you think that at least he's not going to play a whole lot. At least you hope not. He's going to play a whole lot. Maybe a game here and there if Mahomes goes out. But
As a backup, yeah, your injury risk is much lower. Yes.
yeah, but behind Wentz, we have some question marks. I think as the third quarterback, we have Chris Oladokun, it was 27 in early September, 6'2", former seventh round pick by the Steelers in 2022. He was actually picked up by the Chiefs practice squad the same year. He's been on the practice squad ever since, except for one game last year. He was called up to the main roster when Gabbert started against the Chargers. He played college at South Florida, then Stanford, then South Dakota State. His last season at South Dakota State, he was a solid quarterback, 3,100 plus yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Mobile, but he's more of a pocket passer. Is he the number 3 quarterback? He became the 3 quarterback last year when Shane Buechele left. He is a 2-time Super Bowl champion, but he's never thrown an NFL pass. He's probably competing for the 3rd quarterback position with Ian Book, 6 feet tall, 26 years old, former 4th round pick by New Orleans in 2021, quarterback at Notre Dame. He played for the Saints, then the Eagles, and the Patriots and the Chiefs this year. This is his first season with the Chiefs. Former solid college quarterback. His best season was in 2019 when he passed for over 3,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, plus over 500 yards rushing. So he had 2 other pretty good years in Notre Dame too. So 72 total touchdowns passing, 17 rushing, 20 interceptions. Can he pass Oladokun to become the 3rd quarterback? He did start one game for New Orleans in 2021, 12 to 20, 135 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 40.6 rating. He was actually sacked 8 times in that game. So that was not a very good game for him. But that was 3 years ago. So it's hard to say. But that's Ian Book. What do you think of the Oladokun versus Book dynamic, Dr. Scaff?
It should be pretty even. I mean, they may both, end up being around somewhere in the organization, but yeah, because you can now keep that 3rd quarterback sort of around, right? Isn't that the new rule?
Yeah, you can have the 3rd quarterback dress uh, and not have to
But
be on the main
but not
roster.
be a rostered player. So yeah, they did. Oladokin did take the 3rd string snaps for the Chiefs. Book came up in the 4th spot uh, for the preseason game. But man, they didn't have many incompletions between the all 4 quarterbacks that played in the game. Like over 81%
Ooh.
combined for the team. It's like Oladokin had the worst game of by completion percentage, was 7 for 10, which is not so bad.
No.
But it didn't score a lot of points though. Is the only unfortunate part.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing too exciting though in that game. Just a
Yeah,
draw.
that wasn't a great preseason, but and you probably want to say, well, at least you get to the preseason game and nobody gets hurt, but that was the Hollywood Brown, of course, got hurt too, so it was not a great preseason first game. And we'll see if the next couple are going to be a little bit better for the Chiefs. But yeah, the Chiefs quarterback room, I think, is we have maybe the best quarterback and one of the best backup quarterbacks probably, in which is saying something, I think. So much different, I think, than the other AFC West teams. Should we move on to the AFC South? So we'll see.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
Normally, I
what,
would ask you like who you think is going to win the division based on the quarterback rooms, but I don't think we really do that. The
if the
AFC
Chiefs
West
don't
because
win,
we're homers and we're going to say the Chiefs no matter what. So,
if the Chiefs don't win the division, something will have gone terribly awry. So
yeah.
yeah. So the AFC South is a little more wide open, I think. But we have some solid quarterbacks in the AFC South. Houston Texans have one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. That's C.J. Stroud. He was 23 in October, 6'3". Coleridge Bernard Stroud the fourth. We talked about him before. Coleridge the third is in Folsom Prison in so he's never so he's had to really kind of overcome some tough circumstances. CJ, I believe he's Coleridge Jr. That's probably where CJ comes from. The number 2 overall pick behind Bryce Young, ahead of Anthony Richardson in 2023 by the Houston Texans from Ohio State. Very prolific passer at OSU, 2-year starter, 85 touchdowns to 12 interceptions in those 2 years, more than 8,000 passing yards, almost a 70% completion percentage. But the question was he just a system quarterback at Ohio State? He actually did very poorly on what was called the S2 cognitive test, which also may have hurt his draft prospects. It didn't seem to matter his rookie season, though. He started 15 games, 63.9% completion percentage, 100.8 quarterback rating, 23 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, 4,100 yards passing. He led Houston to the playoffs. He was won a playoff game. Didn't throw in, he threw 3 touchdowns to no interceptions in the playoffs. Was this a fluke season? Is he emerging as one of the great young quarterbacks? Kind of remains to be seen. It seems like he's one of the good young quarterbacks. It's one of the great rookie seasons, but whether or not he can top it his sophomore year is something that maybe that might or might not happen. But I think Stroud seems like he's the real deal. At least from what he did his first year, but we'll find out, I guess, this coming year. I would imagine he will not have quite as good a season this second year as he did his first year, but that doesn't mean he's not a solid quarterback.
And also proving us right though too, right? Because we both
both
had
thought Stroud was going to be the best we thought he was going to be better than Bryce Young. I think we thought maybe Anthony Richardson might have the most upside of the quarterbacks drafted,
which still may be true, but
yeah.
we don't. Those are a lot. That's a long-term question more than the who's better right now, especially at the when we're talking about like the number 1 picks and we both thought Stroud was probably the better player.
He's above average height rather than below average height, and I think that was the main thing. And he was just as prolific in college as Bryce Young was. And
you don't want that pocket passer.
You don't want the pocket size pocket passer. Yeah. Stroud's backups. There are 3 of them on the Texans. I'm not quite sure who will be listed as the first backup. It seems like probably it'll be Case Keenum,
I thought it was going to be your favorite guy.
It's not gonna be Tim Boyle. He's good. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but Keenum is 36 years old now. He's been around for a long time. 6'1", former undrafted free agent from Houston, the University of Houston, now at the Houston Texans. He moved across town. He was actually first on the Texans in 2012. Then he went to the Rams, then back to the Texans, then back to the Rams, then the Vikings, then the Broncos, then Washington, then the Browns, then the Bills, and now again with Houston. This is his second season with this stint in Houston. Borderline starter in his career, solid backup. His best year was probably in 2017 with Minnesota. He was 11-3 as a starter, 98.3 quarterback rating. He led his team to a playoff win, the famous Minnesota Miracle against the New Orleans Saints that year. 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. A 30-36 record as a starter, 79 touchdowns, 51 interceptions, 84.6 rating. So solid starter. He's not going to wow you, but not terrible. He's a good veteran presence. He started 2 games last year for Houston when Stroud had a concussion. The question is, will he be the number 1 backup, or will he be the kind of third quarterback around? Because the other guy challenging for the backup position is probably Davis Mills, 6'4", will be 26 in October, a third-round pick by Houston in 2021. So formerly the quarterback of the future for Houston until they picked C.J. Stroud. He played at Stanford, but not very much. He only threw 18 touchdowns over 2 seasons at Stanford. So he's played a lot more in the NFL than he has in college. He's started 25 games, but only won 5 of them as a starter. 35 touchdowns to 25 interceptions, 83 rating, about 6,000 yards passing. He started most of the 21 and 22 seasons. So is he the backup, or does he still have some starter potential is kind of the question we have with Davis Mills. I don't think either of us have a question about the number 4 quarterback, Tim Boyle. He'll be 30 in October. I think of anybody outside of Nathan Peterman, he's probably the worst quarterback still around. He played at UConn and also Eastern Kentucky. He's with the Packers for 3 seasons, then the Lions for 2, then the Bears, the Jets, the Texans. He only started 1 full year of college at Eastern Kentucky. And that year, he threw 11 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, only 2,100 yards. Why is he around? He started 5 career times, 5 times in his career, 3 for Detroit in 2021, 2 for the Jets last year when he replaced Zach Wilson. He was later benched for Trevor Siemian. 0-5 record, 55.2 quarterback rating, 4 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. He is not a good quarterback. He is not somebody you want to be brought in to the game because you're going to lose that game if you bring him in. So I guess if you have him as your 4th quarterback, it's not too bad. He must have some sort of information, dirt on somebody, or some sort of, maybe he has some sort of deep knowledge that somehow he can't translate into his own playing, but can translate into somebody else's. But I think Tim Boyle is clearly the 4th quarterback. What do you think of this Texans quarterback room? How do the salaries line up for Houston?
So Stroud, because he was a number 2 overall pick, he is making 8.2 million this year, which is a little higher than some of the other quarterbacks we've seen already. We talked about anyway. Davis Mills is just barely above Case Keenum, 3.4 to 3.3 million. Tim Boyle, a distant 4th at 985K. Davis Mills did take the number 2 team snaps in the preseason game. And it seems like he did all right, I guess. Keenum took the 3rd string snaps, was 5 for 6, 40 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Davis Mills, 8 13, 89 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Stroud just played the first 2 series. They were relatively short. They did get a touchdown in the 2nd series. So it was 2 of 4, 41 yards with a touchdown pass. Boyle, your favorites, was 4 of 8, 28 yards.
Well, yeah, so that's the Texans. The other 2 of the other team, all 3 of the other teams in the AFC South also have young starting quarterbacks. The Tennessee Titans moving west from Houston, and the Tennessee Titans actually did move west from Houston several years ago when they became the Tennessee Titans. They moved from Houston to Memphis briefly, and then to Nashville. They drafted quarterback last year as well. That was Will Levis. He's 25 years old now, 6'4", 2nd-round draft pick from Kentucky. He was the number 33 overall pick, so the first pick of the 2nd round. He was at Penn State before that. He couldn't get past Sean Clifford on the depth chart. Clifford, of course, is one of the backups now at Green Bay in that kind of iffy quarterback room. He graduated with a finance degree from Penn State before he transferred to Kentucky in 2021. So he's a smart guy. His mom went to Yale. He had nearly 6,000 yards passing at Kentucky, 18 and 8 as a starter there, 46 touchdowns to 25 interceptions. So a big arm, but maybe he makes a few mistakes here and there because he thinks his arm is can get things done. Started 9 games for the Titans last year, 3-6 record, 1,800 yards passing, 8 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, 84.2 rating, sacked 28 times in those 9 games, so quite a few times. Probably most famous for his weird dietary habits, which include eating unpeeled bananas and drinking coffee with mayonnaise in it. Um, but he
Gross.
passed Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis on the depth chart last year. It seems like he's entrenched as the starter, but the question is if he struggles, are they going to stick with him or are they going to go to the next guy on the list? But do you have any information about Levis, or do you want to move on to the quarterbacks and then talk about the room as a whole?
I was just gonna look to see who started the preseason game, and it looks like it was Levis. He did start, yeah.
Yeah, they brought in a new guy maybe to be the number 2 quarterback, and that's Mason Rudolph. 29 years old now, 6'5", 2018 third-round pick from Oklahoma State. He was with Pittsburgh his entire career up until this point. 3 year starter at Oklahoma State, great college career. He started 13 games overall in his NFL career. It's 8-4-1 as a starter, so pretty good record. Uh, most of his starts were in 2019, replacing Ben Roethlisberger. Probably the most memorable moment was when he was beaten with his own helmet by Myles Garrett in a kind of ugly fracas that they had. Rudolph was actually 3-0 as a starter with Pittsburgh last season, and he started the playoff game against the Bills, which they lost. But a career 87 quarterback rating, 118 rating as a starter in the regular season last year. So the question is, how much chance will Rudolph get to be the starter at Tennessee? If Levis struggles, do you think they bring in Rudolph? Because it seems like they've lost all their faith in Malik Willis, who's only 1 month older than Will Levis. He's 25 as well, 6'1", 2022 third-round pick from Liberty. He had gone to Auburn earlier in his career. He threw for nearly 3,000 yards and rushed for nearly 1,000 yards in 2021. He started 3 games as a rookie in 2022 for the Titans, but didn't do very well. 42.8 quarterback rating, 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. He's a dual threat quarterback, but does he still have a future with Tennessee or anywhere, or is he just a bust? That seems to be what the Titans are kind of leaning towards, is that maybe he's a bust. Um, but we have Levis, Rudolph, and Willis in the Titans quarterback room. What do you think of what's going on in Tennessee, Dr. Scaff?
Yeah, well, it seems like I mean, obviously want Levis to be the quarterback of the future, drafting him, relatively high. But they're going through a big transition here, though. Anyway, right? Derrick Henry's no longer on the roster now, so he'll be in Baltimore this season. So we're having to completely remake their sort of franchise and how they will look and play, maybe totally different than what we've seen in the past. So they're likely to be less reliant on the running game and look probably passing more. So it kind of makes sense. You want to see what Levis can do, because he did have some pretty exciting plays, at least early in the season when he first made it in. So yeah, it should be an interesting season anyway. I don't know how they were good some of those years anyway. Hey, so I don't know. I don't have much expectation for them. They're one of the harder teams to read, I think,
Yeah, they have
from
a
trying to
new
like
coach.
predict what you think they're going to get from there. So
Yeah.
it's very different than they have been in the past, especially with, like you just mentioned, new coach and every
Oh,
and now a whole different strategy too. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
see what happens. But they seem like they brought in a lot of veterans, a lot of old
Yeah,
guys. They still DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They brought in some older, I think Jamal Adams is coming on, and like they brought in some older
Tony
receivers and older.
Pollard
Yeah, Tony
from
Pollard is brought in. Yeah, they
Dallas.
yeah, they brought in quite a few guys, so they're kind of a veteran team. So I think they can challenge. I think this is AFC South is one of those divisions where I wouldn't be surprised if any of the teams won the division. I'd probably be most surprised if the Titans won the division, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of the 4 teams won. Really, they're all. I think none of them are going to be great. I think Houston, even though they won last year and Stroud did really well, I think they play a much tougher schedule this year. So I think they'll take a little step back. Um, but I guess we'll talk about the division as a whole in a little bit. But
But
um,
they all three quarterbacks have some experience though. Who do you think is the highest paid of the three?
I would guess it's probably Rudolph just because of the way the draft, because he's on a he's on another contract. He's free agent contract.
Yeah, but not by much. He's going to make 2.7 this year. Will Levis is second at 2.2 million. Malik Willis at 1.4 million. So it's still a very cheap quarterback room
Yeah,
for as much experience, I guess, as we've at least seen anyway. So that's they're getting to save some money there anyway. Yeah, they're the 31st
hmm.
team by quarterbacks on their payroll. Only 6.3 million.
It's not bad.
But that's only because they only have three guys too. They don't have
They
a
only have
fourth
three
or
guys.
fifth quarterback on their roster like some teams have.
Yeah, well, the Raiders now have five with the picking up a Nathan Peterman, and now the Colts also have five quarterbacks in their quarterback room right now. We'll go through all five of them here on the One Trick Power Hour, starting with Anthony Richardson, 22 years old, 6'4", fourth overall pick in 2023. Played at Florida. He only had 1 year as a full-time starter. Dual threat quarterback, drafted more on potential than production. He has a 4.3 40-yard dash, weighs 245 pounds. So big guy. He's like a, faster Cam Newton type of player. Maybe he's going to be the next Cam Newton or the next Lamar Jackson. You're hoping he's not the next Robert Griffin because of his injury history. He started 4 games for the Colts last year before injuring his shoulder. 2-2 record, 577 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 87.3 rating. He also rushed for 4 touchdowns in those 4 games. So he enters 2024 as the starter. Can he stay healthy? That's the question. He's got the sky's the limit, it seems like, for his upside, but will he be able to cash in on that potential? Running quarterbacks don't always last a long time in the NFL. So
Well, and you mentioned he started 4 games. He left 3 of those games with injuries.
yeah.
So that's already getting a little hairy there for
Yeah, he'll have to learn
durability.
how not to take the big hits.
Yeah.
And maybe he can learn that from Joe Flacco, the backup, probably number one backup, I would guess. 39 years old now, 6'6", former first round draft pick for the Ravens back in 2008 from Delaware. He was with the Ravens until 2018. He won a Super Bowl with them. He was a good playoff quarterback, 10-6 career playoff record. He was replaced by Lamar Jackson in that 2018 season. He's bounced around since then. He's been with the Broncos, the Jets, the Eagles, the Jets again, the Browns last year. This is his first year with the Colts. Last year, he was actually Cleveland's best quarterback. He had a 4-1 record, 13 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, 90.2 rating. He was a big spark in getting Cleveland to the playoffs. He actually played better than Deshaun Watson did, and maybe that's why he was actually no longer in Cleveland, because there may have been a quarterback controversy had he stayed around. And he's getting older. He's 39, so he's other than Aaron Rodgers, he's the oldest quarterback in the league, I think. Does he still have it, or is he washed up? He didn't have a great playoff start against the Texans. He threw two pick sixes maybe against the or it wasn't 2 pick sixes, but he threw 2 bad interceptions against the Texans in that playoff game. So he's probably the number one backup. Third quarterback is likely Sam Ehlinger, 6'1". He'll be 26 in September. Former 6th-round pick by the Colts in 2021. He played for Texas, where he beat out Shane Buechele as the starter. Buechele, of course, was the former Chiefs' third quarterback, and then he went to. I think he was upset that he didn't make the original roster last year, so he went to Buffalo, and I think he got injured in that preseason game. He's injured now.
Mm.
But Ehlinger, solid college quarterback, started parts of 4 seasons. He started 3 games for the Colts in 2022. That was the disastrous Frank Reich, Jeff Saturday year, when Jeff Saturday was brought off the analyst table at ESPN to coach the Colts. He was 0-3 as a starter, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 76.1 quarterback rating, 573 yards passing. Is he the long-term backup? Because Flacco's not going to last forever. Does he still have an upside as a potential starter somewhere, or does he stick around? Does he even stick around as number three? Does he get bumped by one of the other two quarterbacks that the Colts have floating around right now? Um, One of these quarterbacks is former University of Kansas and North Texas quarterback Jason Bean. He's 25 years old, undrafted free agent by the Colts this year. He was actually drafted number 1 overall by the Memphis Showboats in the UFL draft this year. For KU last year, he had 2,100 yards passing, 18 touchdowns passing, 7 interceptions, 3 more rushing touchdowns, and about 300 yards rushing. Is he the developmental quarterback, or is he just a UFL quarterback? Is he just a camp body? That's the question about him. Same questions we have for Keaton Slovis, former USC Pitt and BYU quarterback. He started actually 11 games as a freshman for USC, and that was by far his best year in college. He threw for 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions as a freshman at USC, but couldn't reach those heights later. He had a 28-17 record as a starter across 3 schools, 80 touchdowns, 39 interceptions, nearly 12,000 yards passing. Experienced college quarterback, just 23 years old still. Also selected by the UFL DC Defenders, so maybe he has that option if he doesn't work out for the Colts. The question is, do either of these two beat out Ellinger? I think we have Flacco penciled in basically as the backup, no matter what. But I think there's some. I think Slovis has more upside than Bean does. He's 2 years younger than Bean, but who knows what they want. Bean might be more of the running quarterback in the mold of Richardson. That maybe is good for the scout team. Maybe he can take some of the hits that Richardson might take. But yeah, what do you think of the Colts quarterback room? How did they fare in the preseason? Who's looking like the third quarterback there in Indianapolis?
They did use all 5 quarterbacks in the game, which is kind of tough to get, enough of those guys in anyway. So Anthony Richardson did start. He saw 2 possessions. He did. It was only 2 for 4 for 25 yards, though, which is okay. Only rushed once for 1 yard, so he wasn't taking a ton of hits anyway. Flacco did go second. He was 3 for 5 for 28 yards. Ellinger, I think, was third. He was 5 for 6 for 80 yards. Did throw an interception. Slovis played most of the third quarter, I think, and he was 3 for 5, 39 yards. Jason Bean was the fourth quarter guy with 4 for 6. He did throw a touchdown pass, so he was the lone touchdown pass did come from Jason Bean. So I was pretty sure I didn't like this guy initially, and then you said he was from KU, so that cemented it for me. So that made it, now I know who to root against, I think, for the to make the roster.
The Keaton Slovis. Yeah, Ellinger went to Texas. You're not a big Texas fan.
Generally, I'm okay with the conference guys, but not KU. There's no acceptable KU player.
Well, fortunately, there are no KU players on the Jacksonville Jaguars, our final team of the evening. But there is somebody maybe that is disliked on this program as much as any KU player. But we'll get to him in a second. Jacksonville, of course, has their starter Trevor Lawrence, who signed a big contract in the offseason. He'll be 25 in October, so still fairly young. He's younger than Jason Bean, for example, who was already 25. He's also younger than Sam Ellinger. He's younger than Will Levis, younger than Malik Willis. So these good quarterbacks are being drafted young. It seems like more often than they're being drafted on the old side.
And he would have been drafted 2 years earlier if the league rules allowed for.
Yeah, he could have been drafted as a freshman in college. Yeah. He's 6'6", number 1 overall draft pick in 2021 by the Jaguars. Played for Clemson, of course. As we mentioned, he probably peaked as a freshman, winning the national championship in 2018. But he was 34-2 overall as a starter, so he didn't really have a bad season at Clemson. 90 touchdowns to 17 interceptions in college. a little less success in the NFL, 20-30 overall as a starter. The three he was 3-14 in the Urban Meyer year, so that was maybe give him a mulligan for that one.
Yeah.
17-16 record in 2022 and 2023. His last two seasons, he's averaged about 4,100 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, about 4.5 rushing touchdowns. He's 1-1 in the playoffs. He lost, of course, to the Chiefs in the 2022 playoffs when the game that Mahomes injured his ankle in the hip drop tackle that is now banned in the NFL. Were there any hip drop tackles that were called in the preseason? Did you hear about any of those?
I have not heard about any, man.
Yeah, he
I
won.
assume because they made the rule, immediately all of the defensive players have just eliminated it from their repertoire, right?
Yeah,
You won't see it at all.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Lawrence has only played two playoff games, but he's done much better in the regular season than he has in the playoffs. 85 rating in the regular season, only 72 in the playoffs. So the question is, does he still have a lot of upside? He's being paid as if he has a lot of upside, or did he peak in college? Like so many of us. Was he um, this Lawrence still, he's young. Is he still one of the quarterbacks of the future in the NFL, or has he kind of reached his ceiling? It doesn't seem like he's um, been quite the player that people thought he was going to be out of college. He was as hyped or more maybe even than Caleb Williams was coming out this year. So, but he's only been kind of an average to maybe slightly above average quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, but I think really it's more about like, trying to build a franchise around him. So like some of the franchise has to like, come up to what the expectation is for actually having, winning mentality inside of the franchise. And they've not been very good for most of the existence of the franchise. So it's like it's kind of a big task to put on a young quarterback's shoulders is to actually try to like build a franchise, not just win games or throw for a lot of yards or throw for a lot of touchdowns. So, maybe it helps that he, looks like one of the Easter Island statues or,
Mhm.
something like that. But, it makes like memes at least to build around as something that's fun for the fans and everything. So, it doesn't hurt anyway. But uh, yeah, I mean, it seems though like that Jacksonville is much better as a whole since he's been there. Whether or not he's going to be like a Hall of Fame quarterback, I don't know, probably not. But as a franchise, they're seeming like they're actually like building something that can be successful and not a perennial doormat like they had been at one point, at least anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of guys who haven't maybe quite lived up to the pressure that's been put on them, we have Lawrence's maybe top backup. We'll talk about maybe the other option in a second, but is Mac Jones, Michael McCorkle, Mac Jones, 6'3". He'll be 26 in September, so he's actually a little older than Trevor Lawrence. Did you know he was a former child model and actor in the Jacksonville area, his hometown? So he's back in Jacksonville. He went to Alabama for college. Did a great senior year at Alabama, 41 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, 4,500 yards passing. But was that just because he was on a stacked team throwing to, you know, um, you know, number one, Heisman Trophy winners and number one draft picks and, uh, players like that. But he was drafted 15th overall by New England in the same 2021 draft where Lawrence was picked number one. He was actually traded by the Patriots in the offseason for only a sixth round pick. So the Patriots didn't really think much of him. 18-24 as a starter, 2-9 last year. Some people were saying, well, he didn't have a good second year because he didn't have great offensive coordinators, but last year wasn't any better for him. Career 85.8 rating, only 77 last year. His best season was actually his rookie season in New England. So he's gone downhill since his NFL debut. So he's also one of those people. Did he peak already, or can he rehabilitate his career, or is he now just a backup? McCorkle, Mac Jones, um,
I thought you
Jacksonville.
were going to ask if like uh um that Trevor Lawrence peaked in college, that maybe Michael McCorkle actually peaked as a child model then, Mike. That's what I thought you were gonna ask. Like the football career was actually way on the downhill because he was already a child model. So
Yeah, I think he was in like commercials and stuff for like local businesses in Jacksonville as a kid. Um, yeah, so he's probably
and
yeah, we have that information on him. Um, but the question is, will he beat out actually experienced backup quarterback CJ Beathard, who's 30? He'll be 31 in November. 6'2", played at Iowa, so another college that you don't really care for. So I don't know if you're rooting for the Iowa quarterback or Mac Jones to be the backup for Trevor Lawrence. He was a third-round pick back in 2017 by the San Francisco 49ers. He's been with Jacksonville since 2021. 3-10 career as a starter, mostly with San Francisco. 19 touchdowns to 14 interceptions, 82.1 rating. Solid backup, maybe. He started one game in relief of Lawrence last year. He threw last year for 349 yards passing and a 98.7 quarterback rating. So he played well in his time last year, threw one touchdown and no interceptions. So is he the backup or is Jones? It seems like Beathard probably knows the system better than Jones, but Jones has the better pedigree and is a little bit younger. So what do you think is going to go on with the Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback room, Dr. Scaff? Who we know Lawrence is the starter. Who is the inside track for the primary backup position? Do you go Beathard? Do you go McCorkle?
so it looks like Beathard had a better game. He did throw a touchdown pass against the Chiefs. He was 7-14, 125 yards in the preseason game. Mac Jones, the nine of 11 for 98 yards isn't shabby anyway. So uh I haven't looked to see who was next though. So yeah, Mac Jones looks like he started the second half. So oops, that's the Chiefs. Looks like Mac Jones got the whole second half. So it seems as though Mac Jones may be the third quarterback, at least by how they played them in the first preseason game, if you take anything from that anyway. But for what they had to give up to get him, that's a pretty decent experienced backup to have for only a sixth round pick. That's not
Yeah.
a bad trade, really, especially it's really is just a stopgap worst case scenario of Trevor Lawrence and CJ Beathard go down, I guess, right? So
Yeah, you might. I think
that's
you
not
could say
terrible.
that you might have the best shot at winning long term with Jones. He was a first round draft pick only a couple years ago. Maybe
Yeah.
he was a Pro Bowl quarterback a couple years ago. So maybe you say if Lawrence goes down for an extended period, you put Jones in instead of Beathard. But I think Beathard's solid. I think the Jaguars have three decent options in terms
Yeah.
of starters and backups. I think that's uh, maybe you can say Houston does as well with Mills and Keenum and Stroud. But it seems like so far they I maybe in the tight. I don't know. I think Willis maybe not so much, but I think both all of these teams in the South, though, if their starters go down, they have somebody that maybe could fill in and do fairly well for them. So this is I think a evenly matched division, but also a division that seems like the teams are preparing fairly well for other contingencies. A lot better than say the NFC North did. If Love goes down, they're screwed. The Packers are screwed. If Caleb Williams goes down, the Bears are screwed. But it's this is one of those things where in these other situations, I think because the division is seen as so winnable, but for all the teams, they want to have a good backup in case their quarterbacks are injured. So, um, which of these teams do you think is going to be the strongest in the division this year? Do you have a division winner? Is it going to be the team with the best quarterback, or is it just going to be just maybe the team with the best overall roster?
I know you're expecting to see Houston like regress, and
I
it seems
am.
like it seems like Houston made some moves that were like, even if there is some regression from CJ Stroud, the team could actually perhaps still even be better than they were last year, even if that happens. So I still expect Houston to be good. They may end up being the Chiefs' biggest competitor during the season. Like they may be scrapping with them for the one seed in the AFC.
You're much more
That's
bullish.
kind of what I think it is. Yeah.
I see Houston as maybe not making the playoffs. I see them as they were 10-7 last year. They played a fourth place schedule. They're going to
Yeah.
play a first place schedule this year with, I think, tougher interconference games. I'm going to look up the Houston schedule real quick. Um,
Yeah, just with some of the moves that they made though, to me it seems like they're doing all of the right things though for like the ads that they made, you
yeah,
know, who they ended up bringing in like wide receiver help. They've got a decent roster, and even if there's some regression with Stroud, or even if he's injured for a brief amount of time, they could be okay. You're right, they will have a much tougher schedule though.
they
So
play. Yeah, so the Houston plays the NFC North and the AFC North as their division. So AFC North is the toughest division, probably top to bottom. So they have all AFC North teams this year. They start out at Pittsburgh. No, wait, that's never mind. No, they start out
at
um,
Colts,
at Colts. Oh, they play the NFC. They play the AFC East. Excuse me. They play the AFC
yeah,
East.
which is fine, right?
Well, they play well, three of those teams are pretty good. I think Miami, Buffalo, and probably the Jets are probably be pretty good. Um,
Maybe.
they play and they play the Ravens and the Chiefs. Yeah, so if you look at their after their bye in week 14, they have a really tough end of the schedule. They have Miami at home, at Kansas City, Baltimore at home, at Tennessee. I think that'll be a tough last few weeks. Um, and they have a decent, okay start, I think. At the Colts, home against the Bears, at the Vikings, home against the Jags. I think they just have a tough schedule. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I see the um, Texans is a little bit like the New York Giants were la
Mm.
last year, when the Giants were kind of a surprise playoff team. They did surprisingly well with Daniel Jones, and then everything went well for them. They won a playoff game, then they lost a playoff game,
Right.
and then everything went to hell in a handbasket for them, even though we
Yeah.
thought I'd be as good about it. So I would, so that's, maybe I'm being unfair towards the Texans, but they have a defensive coach. They don't have an offensive coach. So I think you need an offensive guru to do really well in the league right now. Um, so I don't know. I could see I could also see Houston. Yeah, Houston maybe could take off and just win every game too, but I I see them as dropping down a game or two simply because they have a tougher schedule and
Yeah.
tougher they play tougher teams. And I think the division is a little better than it was. So I kind of like Jacksonville to come back as the division leader, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was either Tennessee or Indianapolis. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it was Houston either, but I maybe I'm just trying to be down on Houston a little bit to just
Yeah.
in
Well, I think
hyperbolic.
your Houston is my Tennessee, I think, in opinions. Like I don't see how Tennessee's gonna do that well this year, but
Yeah.
you know, as we saw last year when we were trying to pick our win totals for the season, uh, we didn't do so well as
No.
to who we thought was going to be good, and didn't necessarily turn out to be that good. So that
Yeah.
that kind of stuff happens pretty regularly in the NFL, and that like the
And
difference between a 6-10 team and the 10-6 team is not much.
yeah. And usually the playoff teams is five or six new playoff teams from the year before. So it's not the same. It's not the repeating teams that always make it. But
Yeah,
um, well, we'll see what happens next year with the AFC South and the AFC West. But we'll be back next week with the AFC North and the AFC East. and more discussion of the Royals, more discussion of the Chiefs as they move towards the beginning of the regular season. We might have some other interesting topics come up as well, but we'll continue our fourth week of our quarterback extravaganza next time on the One Trick Power. Do you have anything else to add for this week, Dr. Scaff, or do we want to close out and say goodnight to everybody? Or good day to everybody.
Time to wrap it up.
Yeah, this has been another marathon session. One Trick Power. Probably we've had 2+ hours of highly interesting and insightful conversations here about the world of sports in the last few weeks. We will have another one next week. We also are in the throes of the Major League Baseball playoff run. We hope the Royals can continue their solid stretch. So we'll talk about more about that next week as well. But until we meet again next week, I am Dr. Michael Wehrman. He is Dr. Andrew Scaff. We are the One Trick Power Hour. Please like and or subscribe to our podcast, available on many podcast delivery services, or our YouTube channel, which is available on YouTube. We appreciate your listenership and your viewership, and we'll see you or hear from you, or at least be aware of your presence somehow through the ether next time. And until next time, we will bid you a good day.